So this is the look at kind of a world that's been built up by players, and they have all these buildings and kind of crisscrossing transport networks. And what you don't see is all the civic side of it, of the government they've created, the laws they've created, because they start in this like pure wilderness, and they have to build a civilization, and they're taking resources from the environment as they're doing this, so they're impacting their ecosystem, and they can actually damage and destroy it. They can cause pollution. There's consequences to your action. You can make the sea levels rise. So you really have to make decisions intelligently as a group.
John, welcome to the show. Today we've talked about a lot of neat things when it comes to the future of gaming and kind of technology and virtual worlds. You are an expert in that field. Take me a little bit down of where you see the future of gaming going.
Yeah, great question, Anthony. So I've been building my game studio for a few years. I used to work in the big AAA studios, and we kind of went indie about 14 years ago, and we've been building up ever since, and really looking at where games are going and how online worlds are starting to evolve and become this really important part of gaming and society at large. And I kind of see that as becoming more and more part of a central piece of culture. Games has always kind of been this like addendum to culture. It's been this separate piece of culture. But I see that progressing. The kids who are growing up with these virtual worlds, they're becoming more and more high fidelity. There's incredible stuff going on there. This is going to become the center of culture. It's going to be all the different IPs are connected through this gaming world, through these things that you interact with. And these are going to be places where you are having relationships, where you're living your life, where you're doing really interesting stuff, meaningful stuff inside of these worlds. So it's really a fast-paced industry right now. So much is happening, and I just think it's going to keep going to a really impressive place. And that's what we're working to build as well.
All the major platforms are racing to grab their piece of the territory, right? Every platform is running to really create these virtual worlds. We with Meta and the Metaverse and really what they've they've the big push for that for a couple last year and there's been a run for it, but a little bit of draw with it. Like everything that we do, you kind of see this ebb and tide of the develop of an idea. Real Player One was a great kind of roadmap or architectural roadmap for folks to see what that might look like. Do you
Mhm.
see something in that type of a category?
I mean, I think what the metaverse is going to be is still pretty open ended, and I think that there is definitely a place for that kind of Ready Player One universe. But I think that a lot of it they get really right. Like I think converting or being able to move between these different worlds, you have this consistent identity, being able to have these different experiences with your friends, having relationships in the game is all going to be really important parts of this kind of future metaverse. But what I think is going to be a lot more important, you don't really see in the movie, is the creativity aspect of players, the creations that they're bringing to the game. That's going to be a huge part of the content. So our philosophy here is that we don't think of them as our customers as players. We think of them as citizens. That's this idea that they are the ones bringing the value. This is their world, and they should have ownership of it. They should be able to earn from what they're creating in there. So as they're building these really fascinating worlds, these virtual societies, they're creating content, they're creating experiences for other people, they're bringing value to this world. They should be included in that, and because they're such a key part of it, and that's the direction I see going with some really large games like Roblox, for example, is really user generated content focused. So yeah, that user generated content and kind of taking that a step further to like user generated societies where players are citizens and they're creating their own like government, creating their own rules and laws and deciding how this thing functions, and it really belongs to them. It's their place. So I think that's kind of the avenue that's least kind of talked about, but it's going to be extremely significant.
That's a beautiful thought there. Where you look at, what we ultimately are, right? We're these creative beings. These, I've always thought of myself when I'm in my best, right? When I let go of all my fears, anxieties, all the stuff that I don't like about myself, the part, I'm this really creative being. right? And I think that that's
Totally.
something that we really feel that when we're at our best us, we're really creative. So I love this. You guys are really going after and working on how do I help them really enhance and show that off, right? Kind of be the
Mhm.
creator that you are. Almost it sounds in the past you might even call that godlike, right?
Mhm.
Your own little universe that you've made.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, creativity is something we're like born with in just infinite capacities, and we try not to lose it over the years, right? And I think games have the opportunity to really like capture that and kind of improve that and help people with that. Yeah. But yeah, so and there's a lot of different forms of what that creativity can be, right? Like it can be, in our game Eco, you could be building a city, you creating this physical structures, or you could be creating a government and like running for office, and you have your like campaign, or you're like transporting goods, or you're mining, or there's all these different ways that you can like kind of express yourself and bring value to the community that then creates relationships with other people, creates value for them, and just adds to the whole experience. So there's just many layers of like how that can manifest.
I mean, you could really mind, kind of blow yourself. You start thinking about how infinite our creativity gets to be in that playground. I mean, if you detach yourself from the physical world and you really get into a digital world where it's really infinite ideas, right? Where I could
Mhm.
start to really, I mean, I could have people walk on the roof. I could have people not walk. I could have people, 25 legs, or I could have people drive like a boat, or I mean, I could have
Mhm.
people look like animals. The ideas that we haven't even thought but that the fun part for me is the stuff we haven't even begun to think about, right? There's
Yes.
kind of what I know and kind of what I know I don't know, but then there's this whole bunch of stuff I don't know, right? I mean, you start to
Yes.
right? That feels like possibility, like start to create a creative place that really kind of pulls us forward, right? Like you get into a place where you're like, man, I just made a whole nother idea of a universe that no one could see. That seems pretty inspiring.
Yeah, and the creativity that players have like is far beyond like what we as a developer team could come up with, because you've got millions of people building these communities. They're the ones nurturing and like creating these societies. They know what's valuable in there, and they're able to create and kind of go in all these different directions and experiments. So it really just leverages like kind of the old style of building a game is like the developers are the creative ones. They create this experience, they create the Disneyland, and then other people go and they buy their ticket and they like have the experience. Whereas the new form of games, I think, is going to be you are much more involved in the creation. You're involved in what's happening in that world, and that can actually earn you real money, or it can just give you a much deeper experience, deeper relationships within that game.
Well, I mean, now with before the roadblock was you had to be a developer, right? If you weren't great, if you didn't know understand the development language, if you came in and said, "I just don't," I mean, you'd have to years and years and years of of understanding programming and how to make different different components or ideas, and writing code. That was the hurdle. But today,
Mhm.
now we've got ChatGPT that can write code for. I mean, we have numerous platforms
Yes.
today that now can all right, if I'd like to I would like to have upside down purple elephants
Uh,
speaking French. I can create that in my virtual world by using one of these AI platforms.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's just going to keep increasing at an incredible pace too, where people are now becoming kind of they just describe what they want and it can become real without having to have that like technical skill. They're much more have like kind of curation abilities almost. And that's going to manifest huge in games, being able to like generate worlds to your specifications, having these kind of AI assistants that are generating them. So that's something that we're really kind of set up for as a future where players can bring that into the experience.
Well, I mean, I think we've all wanted to have a sense of there you go. Here, you gonna show me a little bit about the virtual world?
Yeah, yeah. I just brought up some visuals of what we're working on right now. This is what I'm talking about with our virtual society. It's called Eco.
Show us around a
Um,
little bit. How the platform. I've got to play with it a little bit. I've really got to enjoy it. But go ahead and tell the
sure,
audience about it. Yeah.
sure. So this is the look at kind of a world that's been built up by players, and they have all these buildings and kind of crisscrossing transport networks. And what you don't see is all the civic side of it, of the government they've created, the laws they've created, because they start in this like pure wilderness, and they have to build a civilization, and they're taking resources from the environment as they're doing this, so they're impacting their ecosystem, and they can actually damage and destroy it. They can cause pollution. There's consequences to your action. You can make the sea levels rise. So you really have to make decisions intelligently as a group. So it's kind of where players as citizens comes in, is that you are working together to make decisions, and everyone's going to have a different idea of like what should be done, and the government is kind of a tool for that. So you can actually create laws in this game that are binding, that define how this community is allowed to perform. You can elect leaders that have particular powers, set taxes, all kinds of stuff like that, to really kind of craft what the community is trying to do. And you have to achieve these big societal goals. So there's a meteor that's slated to hit the planet in 30 real life days, and you have to band together as a society, build up your industry, your technology, your research, your economy, to shoot down this meteor before that happens. So this is really like long-term kind of a big societal goal. It takes lots of individuals kind of participating in this, and allows them all to kind of collaborate within this government where they can decide what to do.
So that's the kind of the game part of it, right? So as they ban as you go in now, you create a territory. How do you decide how big a territory? Do you own the territory? Does someone own it? Does a group own it? Does everybody chip in to buy the territory?
Yeah, it's kind of it steps up over time. So you can have your own little like homestead where you just have like a few plots of land that you're able to manage yourself, and people all over this virtual world will have that. But then as you band together and start to form towns, with your neighbors, then you'll be able to claim more property and more of the land. And eventually these towns, countries, federations will completely cover the world, and laws will kind of apply everywhere. Whereas at the start, it's just very isolated and kind of individualistic, and then you have to become more connected as you grow. So that experience is part of the game.
That's interesting. When my son was younger, he used to play this game called Club Penguin.
Uh-huh.
And, he would play for hours, and, he just was in it, and I remember one day I got kind of frustrated with him. He was kind of engaged, and I'm like, "All right, come on, I need to." But I thought to myself, "Okay, how about if I go down to his world and get into it with him?" And one day he took me into the world that he had created, and it blew me away. Right? He had, all these different territories and pets and animals and clothes and outfits and what he ate and the things he had bought and sold and created and earned and the stuff. It really was this dynamic world. And he was, probably 6 or 7 years old. Right? I mean, it was
Yeah.
still, I mean, a little kid, just really, took the creative part about it. And I didn't see that. All I saw was him not spending time with me, which was a little selfish. I didn't see him being this creative being that he was, and his
Yeah.
ability to be. And when I saw it was pages and pages and pages and pages of development,
Beautiful.
it blew me away. It was a beautiful. It really was a beautiful world he created.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that the impact that has on a kid, I actually kind of had a similar experience when I was growing up, that my dad got me like Commodore 64, and I was able to like do little programs on it. But just that idea of like creating your own world, being able to like kind of be responsible for this thing and like think about it from a creative aspect, is such a vastly different experience than just a shooter game or something where you're like kind of on rails and you're like having the experience. It positions you so differently. And I think that parents would do well to think about like what is the type of screen time that's happening versus like just limiting screen time. It's like, well, if you're doing something creative with your friends, that's pretty cool. If you're just like shooting zombies, maybe not spend like 8 hours a day doing that. But if you're like building this awesome project and world, like maybe that's fine.
Well, I also think that we're gonna. I'm seeing that some of that screen time was actually training what what my generation did not. I mean, we weren't trained in computers at all. In fact, we started the world without computers, right? We entered the world. There were no computers when I until maybe I was 15. We didn't have a computer at my house, and and my real judgment is that at first, because I don't know it, I'm mad about it, right? And I really got this kind of, hey, you're not learning the way I did. And there was a
Mhm.
frustration with, but today at 55, I'm starting to really see that maybe has been training their brains, right, for a world that's way faster than my world ever was, right?
Mhm.
These games, these video games are training their minds because the things that are coming at the human today are faster than ever, right? And some of the stuff
Totally.
really does help, uh, open up their ability to see things much, much faster, much, much quicker. Now, there's always going to be this question between the virtual world and the physical world, right? And as you develop the virtual world in your world, do you see any social credibility for what you do in the virtual world happening in the physical world? I mean, you see someone getting, some social creds for, hey, you're that guy that made, that certain city. Oh, you're that guy. I
Yeah.
mean, can you see some social creds happening in the physical world?
It's tricky because a lot of times people are just nowhere near each other when they meet together in these games. So there are cases where people like end up meeting up, or there's plenty of cases where you're playing with your friends, or your parents playing with their kids and having these really great experiences that are bonding in this world that they're then able to like talk about and share and like learn from in reality too. But yeah, I think that connection between reality and these virtual worlds is just going to get stronger. I think that I kind of see that every experience is going to start to revolve having these like interactive places where you can take part of them. Any like IP, any like, fan base. There's going to be more and more places where they can kind of congregate, they can interact with each other, they can build things together, connected to this thing they all share. And that is going to become a lot more of a kind of a normal part of culture. It's kind of secluded right now to certain uh, you know, gamers or whatever, but that's going to become more and more of a present thing. And I think that's going to actually add a lot of value and not necessarily take away time, but give you better, and really interesting relationships and really interesting experiences.
Or you think their time between the physical world and the digital world will kind of flow back and forth with each other? That maybe you're waking up for breakfast and then you're interacting somewhere through your day in the virtual world. Let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how that flow kind of how you see that flow happening in their life.
Yeah, I think it's converging, right? I mean, you look at upcoming techs like augmented reality, which is like the ultimate merging of like the digital worlds and the physical world. But now you have the digital world in the physical world. So I kind of see it in steps towards that as that technology starts to come online. These digital places will start to become more real and more just like present in our physical, reality in a sense. But yeah, even these days, like you have your phone, you're able to hop into these worlds, you're able to check on what's going on, you're able to like kind of manage this like additional layer to your life wherever you are. And it has a real rich quality that, if you're a kid in school and all your friends are playing together, you're really this is an important part of your life. It's like whatever you're building in this game you're talking about all the time. It's you're trying to learn and become better in order to do it. So yeah, I think that's just going to keep accelerating.
I notice that people have this. Well, no way people are going to be in a virtual world, and for some sense, it is takes a little bit getting used to, right? There's a little bit. I mean, I've got an Oculus, and I don't use my Oculus like, I thought to myself, I would use the Oculus all the time. I can't wait to get in there, see this, and maybe I'm using it, maybe I'm not using it as much as I can, and every once in a while I'll get some screen time on the Oculus and go in there. But what I've noticed is that we have a little bit the digital virtual world is a little bit unique for us, right? As we start to enter that world, but we've always had an augmented reality, right? I mean, I was just down in Boca Raton, Florida, and I was at the beach on Friday morning, and there was a group of Hasidic Jewish men there, and they were doing morning prayers. And I would say to you, I mean, as I look at that group of people that are, I mean, or religious people, there's always been a sense. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
as much an augmented reality in their religious beliefs. And I don't mean to be insultive in any way to anybody, so I want to make sure that that's really clear. But I mean, we've created these realities for ourselves. I mean, nationalism, religious beliefs, the financial world. These are all augmented realities that we've created stories around, and we live in them today like they're like gravity. I mean, you go ask a religious person, to question what's going on. It's not
Mm,
possible. That's not. It's real, right? It's just like
yeah.
Newton's law of gravity, and but that wasn't always true, right? That took some birthing and some creativity, and those things have been handed down from generation to generation. But like this world that's getting created, I mean, this is new, right? These are new territories where, like when I was a kid, soccer wasn't a big deal. Right. I never played soccer. Maybe when I went to Italy on vacation with my parents, my cousins played soccer. I heard about soccer. I heard about Pele. But today, my kids live in a world of soccer. That's what every kid does. They all know every name of every player. It's become part of a society where, these are just new places for us to go and learn a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, it's the original metaverse is like religion, right? That I think there's something to that. There's something very human about that desire to kind of augment our reality to create these additional kind of like layers of meaning. And you see that, I mean, I like the book by Yuval Harari, Sapiens. He talks about this idea that like corporations, they're like real things that we feel like they're real, but they're just this like additional layer of meaning that have like billion-dollar consequences and like provide livings for people or like do terrible things. And this is all just like this kind of thing we've manifested, right? And it's the same thing with the metaverse or digital world, is that the places that we kind of conjure up can have this reality that starts to really impact the actual physical reality as well. I think the impacts that corporations have, despite not being an actual physical entity of any kind, are like running the whole world basically. So it's pretty crazy to think about, and I think that games are unlocking like the next potential of what that's going to be.
Well, I think as they're walking hand in glove with technology growth, right? To date, the flat screen, my computer, my TV, my iPhone, my smartphone, that 2D vision, that 2D view of it, gives you like a limited experience, right? To get it to really to jump into that next level as technology starts to break through the devices and my ability to see it and access it easier. I mean, look, someone's going to create something that's way easier than the Oculus. I mean, I put that damn thing on. I'm just sitting in my living room with my kids, and I'm like, all right, one of us is on it. I need 7 Oculuses for everybody to interact together. It becomes kind of a
Yeah.
little bit difficult. And one person's playing, everybody's watching them. It's kind of that I'm separated. So how do I get it so that we can all play? We can all kind of go somewhere. We can all travel the world in experience. I think the devices and our
Mhm.
access to that, folks can start finding breakthroughs to really create access to this augmented reality in a much smarter, quicker way.
Yeah, I mean the hardware is always a big component of that, and it's changed a lot over the years. I mean, you think of like mobile phones and how that's just added the ability to interact with people anywhere you are. That's been like a societal changing technology, right? And I think the kind of next steps of that, I mean, VR is an interesting one, but like you said, it's very confining. You got to put on a headset, you got to own multiple headsets. But I kind of see that tech going, becoming smaller, becoming less obtrusive, becoming like seamless. So you just put on like a pair of glasses or whatever, and so now you can see all this digital realm that's surrounding you. So it'll just it kind of comes in fits and starts, I think, like the same way that like mobile emerged and it was a total sea change in how the world interacts. And then we'll have AR will emerge and it will be another total sea change of how we interact with the digital world. So yeah, it's coming, and there's definitely big improvements for how we interact with all this stuff.
What do you see as the demographic for the future gamers? I mean, as we continue to expand, what do you see as that demographic for citizens that play your game?
Yeah, I think that's going to become pretty ubiquitous over time. And you think of kids that grow up these days, they're like living in virtual spaces. The COVID kids who were like spending their entire 2 years in Minecraft with their friends because they couldn't like meet in person. Like they are trained to like see these digital places as real places. And I don't think that's going to go away as they grow up. I think that's just going to augment it. So there'll be, richer, deeper experiences, kind of more mature experiences, or experiences that are like connected to the real world, that have value, that generate value for you. So I really see that kind of just expanding a lot more, and like, future generations, I think, are so trained on games that it's going to be part of their entire lives.
Well, I mean, you certainly see how, as online realities become, more and more. I mean, with more and more people going there and creating these worlds, right? I think that that's the part the metaverse is missing. I mean, look, just the amount of content that's needed to create what we're going to do to make it that kind of experience will take millions of people's time, right? And maybe even the AI, as it gets developed smarter and smarter, it speeds up that process and assists in really creating towns, and maybe getting those pieces to be 80 or 90% there, and now we can just put the finishing touches on it. You
Hmm.
could see that being pretty possible. But uh, to get from where we are now, I look, every game I go into, they're great, and there's some level of it, but really get that sense of this is where I feel great hanging out in a place where this is a healthy place for me to be creative, and I can socially interact with others and not isolate, right? Because
Hmm.
I think a lot of it, the gamers in the past have been kind of socially isolated. At some point, then really gaming groups became part. So if you're part of gaming, you were there. Now, how do we get it to be, kind of everybody can interact? Where I can go find my grand. What was great about Facebook was, grandparents could. My mother taught me Facebook.
Uh-huh.
There we go.
Here's some examples of our avatars in the game. But it kind of points to that effect of, I think, that relationships are one of the most, it's obviously one of the most important things in life, and that can be the most important things in games as well. A lot of games it is. So that it's not this isolating thing that like sections you off from the world, but it connects you deeper to other people, to people you already know, to your friends. So having these really rich identities, this is what we're creating in our games, is you know being able to have this really cool avatar that you can create, that you can relate to. We're going to animate its face so that as you like have expressions, your webcam sees it and animates your character, so it just puts you in the game in a really deeper way, and representing not just kind of your physical form, but also your identity in the game. Like, what is your history in that world? What have you made? What culture have you made? What's your reputation? What's your participation in the government? So everyone you meet, you kind of have some like context for like who this person is. They're not just like a nameless avatar just going around. It's like there's ways you can connect to this person. You can collaborate with them. You can compete with them. You understand who they are, what they've done, and that just breeds like much better connections with people. um, Builds a very positive environment. If people are kind of anonymous, it can easily become toxic if you're competing with each other. But when you're have these deep identities that you're kind of curating, you want to take care of that. You want to be positive in this world and not be a jerk that people are going to dislike. So it becomes it just leads to a much more meaningful and like productive environment that's valuable to players. It's not kind of taking from them. So I think you do bring up a good point that it's very easy for games to become isolating, or for to like, kind of give this simulation of a feeling of achievement, but really it's just kind of taking away people's time. But it doesn't have to be like that. And I think that games that, they're based in things that are valuable outside the game as you do them, like in eco, you're using kind of scientific data to make decisions. So you're looking at like population levels or pollution levels. You're proposing to the government like, we need to do this as our forests are being chopped down, and actually have this data that you're arguing from. So that's like a skill. It's like understanding and using data, understanding the science behind this. And then the civics layer of like, talking to other people, convincing other people of your ideas as well. It just layers it all on top of each other with something that's like valuable to people.
I like that. Yeah, it's different from video games. You have three lives and you're gone. Right here, the life you live builds on itself. Right?
Hmm.
You start getting some social credibility by your actions.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, totally. And that becomes super important because your goals in the game are these huge societal goals where you have to collaborate. You have to find your niche. You know, you have to stop climate change. You have to stop a meteor from hitting the planet. You know, so your relationships in those games are super important, and applying your learning becomes meaningful to the group. It just creates this like environment that's really conducive to better experiences like that.
That's interesting. That's so as you're developing the game and really growing this. Now, I know you're out doing some fundraising right now, and you're scaling the company. Talk to me a little bit about that, and the challenges of scaling your company and growth.
Yeah, we're kind of unique in that we haven't taken any equity funding so far. We did have a government grant, Department of Education funded us, National Science Foundation funded us. So that was, and we did a Kickstarter also. So that got us off the ground and got us to early access. But the way that I see games kind of emerging as this like cultural centerpiece, as the the future internet is going to be hyper connected, and games are going to be such a key part of that. I want to move faster. So even though we've kind of organically grown so far, I'm thinking that now is the time to like speed things up. That the future is coming really rapidly. There's all these new creator tools coming online. AI is starting to be a really credible thing. We want to get our foothold into building this idea, this core idea of like a virtual society of these players as citizens. I think that's going to be a thing that's obvious in retrospect, right? There's not really a lot of companies that are kind of taking this on, this idea of like recreating society inside of a game world. But you can really picture that, I think, as being a key focal point of future culture. So yeah, so we're raising funds for that. We're doing our seed round and just meeting lots of venture capitalists that kind of focus on games. There's actually a lot of funds that are specific to games now, which didn't used to be a thing. Like 10 years ago, there's like maybe one, and now there's like dozens.
Oh,
So
wow.
it just kind of speaks to like how fast this is emerging and the market opportunities that are there as well.
I was talking to Andrew Faith over at Call of Duty this morning on some other stuff that we're working on, and they're racing to integrate all of the AI platforms into their development. And he's like, well, you can kind of see how his team may change, right? Because there's a whole there's a whole difference being able to use these AIs to do the development of their worlds, and you can see how they're trying to put that across what was thousands and thousands of people. They're racing to add these to every team's development core.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think beyond that, beyond just adding to the developers toolkit, you're adding to the players toolkit as well. So now they can have these tools that are like extremely powerful. And that's kind of even more impactful because developers have technical skills, but players don't necessarily have those yet. And these tools will let them, it just unlocks this whole like Pandora's box of creativity that they can now unleash into games because of AI and because of these really cool tools.
So does that mean as you go for social funding, as you go for a round of funding, how does that impact what you need to really move the group forward? Obviously scalability. How many users do you have today?
How many users? We're close to 1 million on Eco in terms of sales, and yeah, it's just continuing to grow. We have a lot of people that kind of come back. We have some people that are just really like they find their place and they're there and they're spending thousands of hours. It's crazy to see like the depth of these worlds that they build. So yeah, we want to scale that up in terms of having more developers, having new types of worlds that players can enter, connecting these worlds together, giving them tools to be more creative. So a lot of different avenues that we're going to just keep expanding on.
Are there abilities to go multi-planet?
Yes, I mean, not something we're announcing yet, but that might be in our
Cool.
in our near future.
Are
Mm.
there as you develop this thing, do I buy real estate in there, and will there be value in me, buying real estate today, developing it as a developer in the real world, right? I mean, that's my kind of core love. Do I
Mhm.
can do the same thing in the virtual world?
There's a lot of projects that do that. They sell like plots of land and stuff. I feel like that can get out of hand in a bad way if it's done, you know, in kind of like a cash grabby way. But I think there is something really interesting to the idea of ownership in a game.
Mm,
And you see a lot of backlash from gamers against crypto, against Web3. Traditional gamers like hate it. They don't allow it on Steam. But and it kind of makes sense because there's so much scams and so much like junk that comes out of that. But I think that core idea of like players owning stuff, players earn like having more tangible ownership of stuff is really important because if you want people to really create in a deep way, such as this is part of their lives, if they have ownership of it, that's going to make a huge difference. So yeah, I think there's potential for that if it's not done in like a a cash grab way.
well, like, in the physical world, I mean, one of the things that we get paid for is, weeding through the infrastructure development for a project, right? I
Mhm.
mean, just a lot of people are like, "Hey, look, I just want to put a house or put a building, or I want to put a business there." And the development of the entitlements, the sewers and water and the geotechnical stuff and all the stuff that needs to do in the physical world to develop a
Mhm.
project, right? A lot of times takes people out. There's like it's just too much. They don't understand how to weed through that. And
Mhm.
in the physical world, we get some value for that. We will come onto a group and say, look, we'll help you develop a project there, and we'll weed you through the heavy lifting. And then once we get to the pad ready building, and now you and your group can put your well developed pad type building there that serves you, and you can serve customers from there. And a lot of the brands we work with, their prototype is pretty well oiled out, and it functions really really well for their operational needs. And so I kind of wonder how that will play out as we start to look at the metaverse, the digital world, the places where every society will have a different entitlement process, right? As you look at, some may have some rules and some may have no rules, right? There's,
Mhm.
you can build whatever you want on that property. Some may
Yeah.
have some requirements that say, are there rules like that today where when you're building a town, a country, a federation, is there a are there rules that say you can put this type of house, or you can put this, this big, or what kind of rules are implemented by
Yeah,
this
yeah.
group?
We have a districting system, so you can say like, here's a district where like deforestation is allowed. Here's a district where like you can hunt or where it's prevented or where you can build. So yeah, we do kind of recreate that in this world because you do have an impact on this world. You know, this isn't an infinite world. This is a world of limited resources that can be impacted by what you do. So it does become important that you make decisions consciously about what kind of developments that you do. I mean, same as it is in the real world, how it impacts people around you, how it impacts the environment. So I think that can add a lot that you have that layer. You know, so many games are about like removing all limitations so that you can do anything. But I think in reality, like actually having limitations makes things fun. It gives you something, it gives you the canvas, you know, the shape of what you need to create in. And that's things like creating districts, creating these like rule sets. Players are the ones kind of setting these restrictions up and how it should work in order to survive in this world that can be damaged and threatened. So yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic.
That's an interesting thought right there. The Having rules actually makes it easier to be creative, right? Sometimes I feel like that's what's happening to us as a society today. Is we have so many options that people are just overwhelmed and nothing happens, right? When I had some options, or I had some guardrails, or I had some places where I had a limited, I could stay. It was easy to develop because I kind of have a fairway to run on. But today
Mm.
there's just so many damn options. There's 1,000 things I could do every moment of every day. Then what do I do?
Yeah, totally. It's you know, you're kind of spoiled for choice that way of like analysis paralysis or yeah, I think that being able to like limit your being limited and overcoming limitations, there's something really satisfying about that naturally. And so you want those in a game world. You want these like challenges, these like difficulties, and you want people to be kind of the ones constructing them too. Like they're building the government that decides like what the regulations are. And now those are new like challenges for other people to overcome. It's really interesting to see in our game. Like we have there's a tax system, so players can create and define taxes. And there's so many freaking tax cheats, people who find like loopholes where they're like, oh, you know what? If I do this thing where I give them a loan and then I forgive the loan and I like, do it through my store that's on the other side of the world, then I can pay without taxes. So there's this constant like, this is like white collar crime in the game. It's really fascinating to see. Like, it's not a violent game. You can't attack each other, but you can like commit tax fraud in the game. So that's really, really cool to see.
Well, and there's an impact to that, right? It's funny how in
Totally.
the digital world you've got that, and the physical world it manifests.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting thought, right? People are committing crimes in a digital world, even in a digital world, they're creating a crime.
Yeah, and I think that's you kind of want that conflict, right? You want like the interesting problems that you have to deal with. I mean, it's a problem in reality, so it should be a problem in the simulation that we have to figure out a solution for. So yeah, I really like that aspect of it. It gives players a good challenge.
As you develop your game and you really continue to develop, do you see yourself, your group, your worlds being able to interact with other worlds?
Yes, actually. I mean, that's kind of the next stage where we want to take it. Is this idea that you have your individual world that you are hosting, like a player can actually create their own world and fill it with like people and this like structures of community, but then allowing that to be opened up and connect to other worlds. So maybe that's like another game in the series, or that's a totally different game, or that's like a modded experience. And I really like the idea that, the same way that players are hosting this world, they're creating and nurturing this community for an individual server. They're also doing that for these networks. So they can create their own network and say, here are the worlds that I want to allow to connect to my system, and setting that rule, they're nurturing that community, because the ability of players to like understand their community, to find a community, to be the ones that are like setting the rules of it. Like there's thousands of these. There's no way that we could like manage this ourselves. So it's kind of this bottom up like metaverse approach is how we term it. And then we project that into the future of you can take these networks of worlds and you can connect them together. So you have multiple people hosting multiple networks, and you can imagine things like streamers on Twitch who play games can allow their audience to come into their network, and then maybe those streamers can have connections between them, and just every layer up you're adding more and more value until you get to that kind of far future, metaverse, for lack of a better term, where everything on the internet has all these connections to each other. You're able to connect to other types of games, to like an educational kind of separate system, or to like a AAA gaming studio, a traditional IP, or like a movie world or something. So it's really this idea. I really like this idea of like the bottom up metaverse. You're not trying to create this massive world and fill it with people. You are doing it from the ground up, so that even like as an individual, you can have this great experience, and you build a town, you're leveling it up, you're building a country, you're getting more and more people involved. And at each step, it's viable, right? So it's playable. You don't have to fill like millions of people to make it work. And eventually those start connecting to each other, and eventually those connections start connecting to each other. So it really starts to snowball and continue building up. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on where that's going to go.
Now, do people in the game, are they able to go to other people's world and interact, and then that person gain some value from that?
They will be, yeah, yeah. You'll be able to decide like which worlds you can connect to, how you can travel between them. We don't want it to be a free for all, because then because we allow modded experiences where you can basically, a mod is like a player makes a modification to the game, so they could really change how the game works in like fundamental ways, such that if you connected it to an existing world, now maybe it would like be a negative, because it'd be like, oh, we have infinite gold in this world, and that's going to like corrupt the economy in this world. So you want players to kind of be the ones that are managing these connections and how you connect between these worlds. But yeah, I think there's huge potential for that.
That's an interesting thought right there, right? How do you make sure that you create? I mean, ultimately, the value of any society really is having finances that work together, being able to take my dollar to your, right.
Hmm.
I ultimately buy more bananas, as Yuval Harari would say. I just want another banana. I love
Yeah.
I love when he talks about chimpanzees and bananas. I think he's got a beautiful thought in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We think about like what is the the business model in this kind of situation. Um, I'll share my little screen here. But that we don't traditionally people are making games, you're selling items to people, and you have the individual purchase of the game, or you might sell things in the game. But once these worlds are kind of their own like economic engines where players are creating stuff, they're trading into each other, then it doesn't have to be something that we're selling. We can just be we're taking a tax on that value on those exchanges. We're providing the environment, they're generating the value just like a real economy, and then we take a cut on that in order to continue developing the game. And that can happen at all kinds of levels, from like, an individual who set up a little town store to like someone who has like a galaxy of multiple worlds of traveling between them. And this really just co-ops everyone to like all the players are contributing, they're part of this, they're earning money from it, and it's also so they're incentivized to add really great content and value, and also it's funding the development of the whole platform itself. So I really like this model as one that we eventually will start to introduce and move to, and that's something that players could actually potentially earn real money from too. But doing it in a way that's like very in control of players and letting them like set how they want to do this.
That's interesting, right? Being able to find a way to have that happy medium between, hey, we have to regulate some financial components we can work together between societies, right? And how allow players to make those bridges and make those decisions on how that happens. I mean, you see it kind of being like the euro versus the dollar type of a scenario.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I think we already have like currency exchanges in the game, where different societies inside a single world can have different currencies that then they like have an exchange rate for.
Hmm.
So I think anytime you get those like connections between like societies, it just generates so much interesting meaning out of that, because figuring out like, oh, what is the exchange rate, or what can I buy with this, or what can I trade, and how do I succeed with these two parties existing? There's just a lot there to like unpack, and like generates gameplay essentially, as well as just like monetary value.
The really beautiful part of that is we've opened up a whole nother, this is like a whole nother territory, right? And as we start to really make the bridges that access that, right, as lidar took the digital world and the physical world and made them connect. We were able to connect them, right, where we were able to kind of figure out where something is in the physical world and add that to the digital world. Right now we have self-driving cars, and now we're starting to get camera vision, and we can see how that will play out in the digital world, right? How we start to make the two of them interact more seamlessly. I mean, ultimately, what we're looking for is I really want to be able to get to the point where when I interact with you on the digital world, I want to feel it, right? I want that sense of, there's
Mm-hmm.
something about when I hug somebody, where I stare into someone's eyes, or when I look at people, right? When I'm around physically around, there's an impact to my relationship there, right? There's a right. And
Yeah.
as we continue to get more and more visceral with the with uh, our interaction with the internet and this Web3 world, I think that's an exciting thing to start talking about.
Yeah, definitely involving more of your senses, and like higher fidelity is just going to make that experience more and more real. So it's really just like it's like two converging lines that you can project in the future. Like, wow, this is going to augment everything in a really interesting way. But yeah.
Do you see our ability to interact? I mean, with this new neural link that Elon's working
Mhm.
on, do you see that as a possibility where you're literally connected to the internet in a digital way?
Yeah, I'm a tech optimist, so I see stuff like that. I'm like, that's freaking cool. I can't wait to be a cyborg and have like perfect recall and
Right.
but there's And it seems like everybody is a tech not optimist these days. And they're like, oh, this is going to create a dystopia of mind control, and like they'll be injecting ads into your brain. It's like you can kind of imagine that happening if certain tech companies got a hold of it. But I like to think that like, yeah, that kind of tech is going to just unlock human potential in an incredible way. You know, especially the idea of like how fast AI is advancing, that it's going to surpass us unless we find ways to kind of like augment ourselves as well. So I think it's a really interesting tech that's gonna, hopefully make a really good positive impact. But yeah,
I
depends how
mean,
we approach it.
right. What we don't know, when I don't know something, I take from all the bad. I mean, I go back to past when I don't have the answer about what's going to happen now. I inject some answer from the past, or something I have from memory, or when they drop the A bomb, or this world's gonna. Or when I watch Terminator, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now look, I think it's really healthy for us to make sure that we don't kill ourselves off as a species. I'm not sure that killing ourselves off may look different than actually humans not being there the way we are today. That as we start to enhance ourselves and work with ourselves, I think we've always done that. I'm not the attachment to being the way we are is the way we want to be. I'm not sure that's uh, if
Mm-hmm.
that feels a little bit of egotistical, right? If I could let go of where I am in search of the next version of our society, the next version of our humanness, uh, you know, there's now how do we do that in a way that everybody doesn't freak the f out and go running for the hills? I think that's worth talking about.
Yeah, totally. It's such a big transition. It's kind of a scary one too. But yeah, it'll be a net positive, I'm hoping. But making that actual transition is not going to be an easy one for society. I think just in general, there's so many things coming up in society that's like, oh, that's going to be a tough transition to make. How are we going to go to like automated work and automated labor? And like, oh, now we can plug our brain into the internet. Like, how is that going to work? Or we can like put on glasses and see this like digital world. We're in for like a weird decade as all these things are like happening at the same time. It's going to be nuts.
Well, it's nuts. It's exciting. This could be the most exciting part of. I mean, this last. I mean, you could say that the last 50 years of development have been the most exciting on the planet, right? I mean,
Mhm.
computers were equal to fire or the wheel or the steam engine, right? I mean, if not 10x of those, and technology will continue to go faster. It's just as we move through these things, how do we stay conscious, right? When I go to the fear. When I go to the fear of, oh my God, this is going to be tough because all transitions are tough. I sometimes think that's coming from, that's how I check out, right?
Mm,
Because as I engage AI and I've got the support tool, in fact, probably more important than ever is I need that support tool to go through what we're about to go on, right? An AI support and an Alexa, Watson, Siri that's even more integrated. I mean, those were the bag phones of technology, right?
mhm.
Those are the bag phones of it. Imagine when I get to a place where I can really interact with Hal, right? Remember Hal from
Yeah, yeah, that's my favorite movie.
right? I mean, how had a much more interactive. When I can get to a point where even some of these movies where I have a relationship with the
Mhm.
AI,
I
you know,
think we're like really close to that. Like using Chat GPT, it's basically almost there. I mean, you can have conversations with the thing like it's a real person. I mean, imagine once they plug that into Alexa, like that's got to be within like a year's time. Someone's going to do that, right? And now you have this like AI creature in your life that you're able to like interact with in a way that's like pretty human, except it also knows everything in the world and can instantly search any fact. Like it's like this alien intelligence is going to be just teleported into our lives very rapidly within the next 2 years, and how we adapt to that is gonna make a determine a lot, I think.
well, some of us believe that AI, as we know it today, maybe it had been given to us from aliens, right? I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know that people understand how we've developed the AI we have. it feels like
Mhm.
it's almost been magically dropped in our lap. And in that sense, I don't know that we're not in a simulation, right? I know that's a kind of a big conversation to have, and take people down a path, but there really, it does seem to be something guiding that, different than I've ever known before. Tough to talk about because an uncharted territory. But when you look at where AI is from where it was last year, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we imagine that over
Yeah.
150 million, but 150 million people now are on ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and
Fastest growing product of all time.
all time, right? And the amount of changes that happened there. So, look, I see where you're heading with this. I'm excited. So hey, before we get into to the end of the show, let's talk a little bit about your fundraise. Let's talk about if you
Mhm.
can. I'm not sure what you're allowed to talk about, what you're not allowed to talk about as you're raising money.
Mhm.
But talk to me about what you're going through and how you're raising funds, and the team that you're putting together to gather that and to move into that arena.
Yeah, a lot of it is just kind of building relationships with these investors out there, talking to them, and really sharing like big ideas. These are people who are super well versed in the games industry. They don't want just like an iterative like upgrade. They want what is the next thing? We want to be part of this like giant home run that's going to happen. So really, I try to frame my ideas with that in mind because that is what we're aiming for. Is this transformation of games into these persistent virtual worlds with players or citizens. They're creating the value. They're creating this whole virtual society, and painting the picture for them of that. Because you kind of got to just, yeah, you want to like swing for the fences. I mean, the original kind of impulse is like, oh, these are like financial people. You want to be conservative and like, you know, make the like conservative business case on the numbers. But it's like, no, you want to be the visionary. You want to be the one who's saying like, this is the future that nobody else is imagining that I'm going to build. So it's really fun talking to these people because they're all super smart and they have so much experience in games, and they have really good questions. But yeah, it's been fun.
I think that's an exciting spot to be in. You're standing in, you're a developer, right? You got this developer. Now you're putting on your fundraising hat and really, and what I've noticed about fundraising is that in the fundraising, I'm actually creating the idea, right? It actually, uh, just about every person I've ever seen go out and raise funds really develops it. In order to get there, you have to get a pitch deck. You got to get yourself into a place. You got to be able to get ready to sit down and formulate a conversation to take someone down. But even while you're there in the room with the person you're raising funds with, I've noticed the idea getting bigger, and you can feel that. And in fact, that's what you want, right? I mean, ultimately, as we push our society forward, and if we stay optimists, right? We stay future, digital future optimists. There is something that could really, I mean, amazingly get creative. I mean, if Alexa can walk with me all day long and be
Mhm.
with me all day long, and she can go, hey, hey Alexa, why is my hip is hurting, right? I've got this. Well, Anthony, remember yesterday you were doing back exercises. You might have pulled, might, when for me, every time I have a back, this morning I woke up and my hip was hurting. I said to my wife, you think I got a tumor? And then
Mhm.
about 3 hours later, I remembered, "Oh, yeah, I did back exercise yesterday." And I could have, that could have been circumvented by Alexa reminding my digital assistant
Right.
reminding me that, yeah,
Yeah, you're fine. You're not. It's not a tumor.
yeah, it's not a tumor. And having that, I mean, that's where we were as a society before the dramatic growth, right? I mean, we were small tribes of people that had our elders guide us because they needed to, right? I mean, if our elders didn't guide us, we would die, right?
Mhm.
If we died, our tribe would die, right? And so those people you trusted, and they guided you in a way that was a survival for the whole tribe, and so you trusted it, and there was something there. As the digital world comes into play, as we really create that, I've been interviewing folks who are out there really trying to do the opposite of what the uh, social media people have been working on, which is feeding you junk food to get you to get more time. Now I'm working with seeing folks who are out there trying to be instead of the junk food, they're trying to be the whole foods of the digital world, right? How do
Hmm.
they help guide you? And maybe say, hey, Anthony, maybe you've been on too long, or hey, if you want to be on for a little bit longer, let's go look at some other ideas that you want to work on. Hey, you want to
Yeah.
work on practicing flying? Let's go knock off a couple chapters in a fun way, right? The AI that guides me in a positive way, I can still get the same screen time or still get the same fulfillment or still get the same interesting way of doing it because AI will adapt to me and my likes and my way of learning, as opposed to what the social media people have. They're more about gathering a raising my blood pressure a little bit. If you go to my feed as opposed to my daughter's feed or my son's feed or my wife's feed, they're all pushing different buttons on each one of us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you really want to make sure the alignment's right there. If your AI is, I mean, that's kind of the problem they have with social media is the alignment is they want engagement and they got it by like causing, people to be outraged all the time and sending them like links that get them all riled up. It's not necessarily in their best interest. Yeah, it makes them more spend more time on the website, but that doesn't mean that it's like good time. So having AI that's like you can imagine an AI that was just like maximizing that to try to get like kind of exploit you to spend the most time or provide the most data, click on the most ads. That could become pretty dystopic pretty quickly. So I think we have to be really like just like cognizant of that. And I think people are of like just the power of what's coming and what we're able to build to use it in a way that's like positively guiding you. That's like advancing your life and not like a burden or like a drain on it.
That's awesome. Well, I got to tell you, I'm excited about what you're creating. I love what you're
Thanks.
doing, John. It's your insightful and wisdom is great as you continue to break through and you're out there raising funds. Audience, if you want to get part of that, we'll put links down below to John and how to get connected to his group. And if you want to be part of raising funds with them, please jump in and we'll have all those connections. Connor on our team will make sure all that's down there for you. And John, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to get a hold of you?
Oh yeah, I reached out on Twitter. Jay Krajewski is. I'll put it in the link, or just email me from my website.
Awesome. I love that. And I love the conversation we have. It was a beautiful thought today. Thanks for feeding my
Likewise.
brain with some ideas that were really intriguing. Audience, as always, if you could just take a second, like and subscribe, it means the world to the team. Everybody working hard to get interesting people out there. If you could just take a second and like and subscribe for us. Any comments for John or the team or any guests you want to have on, please put that down below. We're always grateful for you guys spending time with us, and thanks.